Hello everyone and welcome to today's episode. I'm Aura Icodin and I'm thrilled to explore a topic that's very close to my heart, namely tailored education and how homeschooling supports gifted students. We have today two incredible guests. First, Dr. Julie Bradshaw from USA, a leading expert in gifted education and homeschooling. And second here with me, Cristina Dascălu, Vice President of the Education Committee in the Romanian Chamber of Deputies. They are bringing us today insight into education policy and innovation here in Romania. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us here.
Yeah. So ladies, before diving in our topic today, I would like you to tell us some surprising or why not interesting fact about yourself, but in connection, of course, to education. What would define you in connection to education? Julie, if you would like to start, please.
Sure. I come from a long background of educators. And actually, I didn't decide to go into education until I was in my mid-20s, which I think is kind of interesting because I dove in and have certification and experience now that I didn't expect to have earlier in my life.
Wow, wonderful. It seems that we have some things that are in common. I come from a family of educators as well. My parents were both teachers, and for a while they also worked with kids that had certain disabilities. And I have a sister who is a teacher of physics, and she has been for a while also the principal of a high school here in Romania. And regarding myself, I was what was considered at that time a gifted kid, but we didn't have a program for gifted kids in Romania. Because of that, I guess I went different directions with everything regarding education. So I have 5 master degrees. Probably for a while I didn't really know where to focus. I graduated all of them as first in class, summa cum laude, as my undergraduate degree, and then I did the same with my PhD degree. And now I'm a university professor here in Romania. I had a period of time. I've been in the States for 15 years, 2 of my master degrees and my PhD being from the States, but I returned in 2009 back home to Romania. So you can see that we all 3 of us have connection, of course, with education.
Yeah, because I used to be a teacher too. Okay, wonderful. Now let's start by setting the stage, Julie, if you don't mind. First of all, for our public, how would you define gifted children? And what are there any, misconceptions when you speak about gifted children?
That is an excellent question with very big answers. There are a lot of different definitions of gifted children, as many ways to be gifted as there are those definitions. But for our conversation today, I'd like to make it really simple and just say that gifted children tend to learn more quickly than their peers and or have a much deeper knowledge base in a specific area. So for today's conversation, if that's okay with you, that's kind of the way we'll look at gifted kids. And so, we may think that those particular individuals in our classrooms are more motivated. They're so well behaved and willing to assist us as teachers. They're creative. They've got unique ideas, all of those things. And all those things sometimes are true about gifted kids. But gifted kids can also have deficits in areas. And that's one huge misconception, that if you're considered gifted or you have a big knowledge base in a particular area, that you should have that interest and background in all areas. Or that another deficit we see with some gifted children is maturity and their ability to relate to other children, or coping. Organization can be a struggle. So they're real people, and they can have as many positive attributes as they do negative attributes, and vice versa. So that's an important thing to understand, that they are unique and really need to be investigated and known in order to serve them appropriately.
Yeah, now speaking about them going to school, we know that many gifted children struggle sometimes to find their place in the traditional classroom. And sometimes some of them might even be labeled as problem children, especially when they are in primary school, to say so, just because their learning needs are not properly met. How do you see this issue in your work, and what recommendations would you have for the teachers?
Well, as I alluded to, really getting to know those children, and all of your students, but especially a student who appears to be acting out or just really doesn't need to pay attention or entertains other students. I mean, it shows up in so many different ways. And I believe that teachers need to know what they want their students to do and what they want them to learn to begin with. And then to pre-assess students, to give them assessments, to figure out, who knows what, who needs what, and then to modify instruction based on those needs. So for example, there are typically gifted kids who know their math facts and don't need any practice or instruction in those. And so a teacher with skills, because it's not an easy thing to do, would modify the classroom environment so that student might have time to clean their desk if they've got some struggles with organization while the other students practice. So being flexible, and first of all, knowing your students, but then flexibly meeting their needs is important.
Okay, I can see. Thank you. Now, Cristina, here in Romania, from a policy, to say so, perspective, what are the biggest challenges our country faces when we speak about gifted education at this point?
Very good question. First of all, we don't have a set of rules for gifted children, and we don't have programs for gifted children, and we don't have even policies for gifted children as we speak. And when we talk about challenges, we talk also about a rigid curriculum that we have. Julie was talking about flexibility. If you have a rigid curriculum, you are not going to have flexibility from that point of view. So you're mentioning, Julie, kids who may be very good in one area,
only one,
because they are gifted, but not in all of them. So ideally, we should focus on whatever those kids are best, so they can get even better. But as the curriculum it is right now, they have to really study everything and at the same pace. And you're mentioning, I guess, the aspect of the kids from a cognitive point of view, that they are, in general, rapid learners, more than the other children. But there are some other issues here, maybe behavioral or learning characteristics for those gifted kids. So they do have an intense focus when they are interested in something, and they resist stopping, but they can also show some boredom in some type of routine tasks, and they may appear inattentive. So here we talk also about teachers who do not have the training to understand that they are dealing with gifted kids, not with kids who are just not paying attention to them. So that means that teacher training in Romania is mostly for, I don't even know how to say, because kids are different, for just average kids. And now they have started to gain some training on struggling kids, some that have learning disabilities, let's say, but not on gifted education as per se. And also the gifted kids have some other characteristics that are common for them. They tend to be perfectionists, most of them. They want the things just right, so they may be, that's why many of them prefer older peers, or they like to talk with adults. And this is, if we speak about some behavioral issues with them or differences, but also regarding, let's say, their social life or emotional characteristics, according to what I read, and Julie can tell us, because you are an expert, Julie, if it's true or not, that they seem to have more emotional intensity than the average kids, and their feelings are very strong and very, very deep, and their empathy supposedly, from what I read, goes far beyond what other kids may have, and strong justice and moral reasoning, and quite early. And funny enough, they sometimes feel like imposters, or they have self-doubt, irrespective of their very high skills and high abilities, but probably because people don't recognize, not all people recognize what they have in front of them, some of the characteristics. So to come back with the challenges here, the fact that people, teachers, and sometimes parents, or peers, or whatever, are not trained to recognize the gifted children. And it's ideal to do early identification.
What age would be suitable for this? 5, 6 years old?
Yes.
The best
Usually
age?
it's, I mean, many of the schools in our country wait until between 7 and 8 years old. So for us, it's second
Well, I
and third
suppose
grade.
when they start school, in fact, when they become students.
We don't know our students very well when they start school in kindergarten. So many schools have put it, those that have identification programs, usually they begin between second and third grade, which is between 7th and 8th grade, or 7 and 8 years old. So.
Yeah, which is fair enough.
Yes, but I mean, there are students that, obviously show their giftedness in kindergarten. And so in a school district that does have teacher training and education and a priority for educating gifted students,
maybe starting with 5 years old or something like that, I suppose.
They can look at individuals rather than kind of broadly look for identification.
Okay. Now, homeschooling would be a tailored solution for gifted education. What would be the benefits of using homeschooling when we deal with gifted kids, Julie?
Well, I don't know as much about homeschooling, but I do know that when you have a smaller student to adult or teacher ratio, you can be more flexible and meet their needs. And again, I talked about expectations. And so as long as the teacher or the parent knows, minimal expectations in all the areas that they want to develop with their homeschooler student, they can pre-assess and then modify the instruction. They need resources. They should have access to whatever standardized testing is locally used so that they can kind of modify, where they're at and assess to make sure they're on the right track. But some other things about homeschooling is just the luxury of time to go out into nature or go to museums and teach children their skills based on real life activity. you know, writing a letter to, I don't know, the local politician on a topic that's important to that child, you know, for example, and you're teaching all kinds of writing skills and those kinds of things. And as teachers with a classroom of many children, we don't have those luxuries. One other thing that is wonderful is connecting homeschooled children to mentors in the industry that they're interested in, and creating relationships in that way so that the students can understand the world a little bit differently.
Can you develop a little bit more this area of mentors? What do you actually mean by mentors? Let's take an example. A 10-year-old boy, a 12-year-old boy, interested to say so in STEM, for instance, STEM activities. What kind of mentor would we find for him? Can you give
It
some
depends on
examples?
the area, you know, this being more specific within that field, but we could start with university instructors, but also then in the field where there's a laboratory, or if it's medicine that the student is interested in, you know, connecting them to a hospital or a doctor.
Well, not only teachers could be mentors, but also engineers or other persons. Okay.
Right, real life individuals we want to expose these children to, so that they understand the opportunities in the world. And because one thing we kind of alluded to is the motivation. You know, when you're a gifted student and you've been taught to tolerate hearing things that you know for hours on end, you know, kids' underachievement is a huge problem. About 20% of gifted students are at risk of, you know, not finishing school in the United States anyway. So, yeah, giving them, you know, a kind of a view of the future and opportunities, and in a homeschool situation there, that is more of a possibility than there is if they're in traditional school.
Now, Cristina, we know that here in Romania, homeschooling is not legal. Which is the current situation? We know that there have been some discussions in the parliament trying to introduce the idea of homeschooling, trying to introduce some legal frameworks for alternative educational paths. Which is the current situation?
You know that we both joined a conference yesterday on two directions, and one direction was homeschooling in Romania, and you saw that there were different views. Some people who understood the importance of homeschools, that it's not for everybody. I mean it's for families that assume homeschooling and can provide the needed training for the kids who stay at home. And we're talking that there are areas where really it should be considered, like traveling families, kids who are involved in sports, or kids who have certain issues, maybe health issues, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, at the time being in Romania, it's not legal. We have started to talk about it in the parliament, which is at least the first step. You know, even in Romania,
every journey starts with the first step.
First step, it's important. But you know, even something, if we talk about specialized schools in Romania, let's say, we have schools, high schools for arts or sciences, but we don't have specialized schools, even specialized schools like elementary or middle part. But there are some pilot programs even in that direction, and we can look at Nordic programs regarding specialized schools and regarding homeschooling. You see that we are starting to do research to see best practices from other countries, to see wherever it is legal, which are the issues. You were mentioning, Julie, earlier that you should have certain rules for that. I mean, regarding testing, regarding mentoring, regarding who is teaching those kids. Do the parents have the appropriate knowledge, or do they hire some other specialists who can do it, other teachers? So there are many things to be considered, I think.
Yeah, I was on the point of asking you, Julie, in USA, how do parents collaborate with teachers when it comes to homeschooling? Which is the teacher's role, to call it so? How important is the teacher in this framework?
They're unrelated. So if a family chooses to homeschool their student, they are not utilizing the teachers. So they're on their own. And so a lot of homeschool parents meet up, create partnerships with other families. So that kind of takes care of the socialization when the kids are together. Because many gifted children, as Cristina mentioned, outgrow their parents very quickly, with their quick
That's why they
learning and their
need
depth of
mentors,
knowledge.
isn't it?
Yes. And they can, so they access other people. But the school districts do not necessarily support that. So it's more in our country, it's more on a county level. Each state is divided by counties. And so the homeschool parents are accountable to the county, not the local school district.
So different laws in different states.
Yes.
Some are stricter, some are less strict, as far as I know.
Yes.
In terms of assessing and evaluation and reporting.
Yeah, well, we're getting into an area that I don't have a lot of expertise, so I can't.
I was going to ask you if you know if states that are more Republican versus more Democratic favor homeschooling more or less, but
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, speaking about socialization, many people fear about this when it comes to homeschooling. However, how can kids who are homeschooled still keep connection with the other persons around?
Yeah, I think it takes a bit of effort on the parents' part. Cristina alluded to the fact that there are many gifted kids who would prefer to talk to adults anyway, and because of their depth of knowledge or their interest in specific things, and some are more mature. There are a number of gifted students who are less mature than their peers, and so that becomes really difficult for other kids to understand because they're the star student in the class, yet they can't, solve a dispute or a problem with another person. So I think, keeping the student involved in group type activities like sports or maybe musical performances or plays, local events, but also teaching them, to help people who have less resources than they do. So doing volunteer work, because we kind of alluded to there are some gifted kids who have a lot of intensity and empathy differently than their peers. And so kind of utilizing that to help them make a difference in the world. So to be involved with other people, a variety of other people, I think is very important.
Now, Cristina, from your perspective as a Vice President of the Education Committee, what need to change in Romanian legislation in order to have a more effective framework for gifted education and at the same time for homeschooling?
First, I think we need 4 pillars, first of all. Legal recognition of homeschooling or programs for gifted kids as valid education. Then we need very, very clear...
When I say valid, you say legal.
Legal,
say so.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Clear, let's say, accountability standards. And if we speak about homeschooling, parent training and access to resources, to a variety of resources, easy access to resources. And also to have pathways back to traditional learning. So I guess those 4 pillars are very, very important. And regarding legislation, as I said, we need to start passing laws, passing them through committees, and then to the plenary meetings. And but that means also, first of all, what we started doing, like gathering experts together, educators, building a community, building the system.
Now, speaking about resources for parents, by the way, in your country, where do parents go when they decide to homeschool a gifted child, for instance? How do they manage this issue of finding out the best resources for their kid or for their kid?
I would say, as I alluded, the county level, so each state has different sections. And so at the county is where they would get access to resources that are available to them.
So there are some resources available.
Yes,
if you decide in January to start homeschooling, you can you can take out your kid, and you can do this just because you have the resources. But how are they online, or where do they find the main pieces of information that they need in order to start the process?
There is a school district oversight group at each county in the state that they would go to. And they would talk to them and see what's available. And that would vary depending on the place. And then they can start. But I would recommend, getting online and joining homeschool parent, online groups and forums and sharing resources, I think is the very best way, because gifted children, someone could hand you a textbook series, at that grade level, and it may not be in any way appropriate for your gifted child. So in some ways it may be, depending on the student, but you really need access to other alternative sources and creative thinking on the part of the parent, because, textbooks just may not do it.
So they usually go beyond textbooks.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
just because that's the main idea when they homeschool, to do something else, to do more than they usually do in a traditional classroom.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And access the real world, I think, is very motivating and helpful for students, who can take in a great deal of information.
Yeah. What could you tell us about the teachers' training? Now, leaving a little bit apart the homeschooling system, what could you tell us about the teachers' training in connection with gifted education? Are there any teachers who are specialized in this area in your country, or instructors or counselors? How do things work over there?
Different states, at the state level really is where most of the educational decisions are made. And so different states have different certification, different universities have different programs. I teach within one at this point. So that really depends, and it's depending on funding. Sometimes that certification or endorsement, depending on what it is required, but it is not always to teach gifted children, either within a regular classroom or in a gifted school or program. So it just depends.
Right. Now, Cristina, in terms of teachers training here in Romania, which would be the next steps that you could take in order to facilitate such workshops and such instruction for the Romanian teachers in connection to gifted education?
for example, I will talk to people like Julie, and I would be very interested, first of all, what resources, I understand that it's state by state, county by county, what resources are you bringing in to that education for gifted kids? Like, do you have money coming from the state? Do you have certain other sources of financing? And how do you do it? I mean, do you finance teachers to get more training to find the gifted kids? Or how do you do, for example, how do you finance even the early identification of gifted kids? I suppose do you have, what do you use to identify, say something like, this kid is a gifted kid, and can you see in what areas the kid is gifted? How much time do you have for that, and what resources can you pull into doing that stuff? And if you could say a little bit, Julie, and then I'll come back to my answer,
Sure.
because I'm interested, first of all, how much money do you get and where do you get it? And also, is there, since this is your field of expertise, is there a lot of research that shows that if you find and if you identify the kids early and if you focus on their skills, on the fact that they are gifted, is there research showing that further on they contribute to the gross income of the country? So you put some money first into those kids with different resources, teachers who are prepared to deal with them, more other types of books than normal books from the classroom. But is there a win-win situation in the end? I would suppose it is, but I don't know what the data suggests. If you have a little bit of information on that, if you could share with us, and then I will continue what I was saying.
So back to the financing or support, that comes through the state governments, and so it just depends on how the state distributes the money. The majority of states in the United States do not currently support gifted education. So what happens in that situation is that it's based on particular counties or school districts to make those decisions, and then they use their own budget, because a lot of the funding for schools comes from local taxpayer money, from real estate taxes for the most part, but they're funded in different ways depending, again, by the state. But if the school board of the school district decides that they want to focus on gifted education, then they do, funnel funds to those resources. The way that gifted identification typically happens is through standardized assessments, through aptitude or intelligence tests, and then tests in specific areas that they're interested in, supporting students. Excuse me. So you can, maybe a school district believes that they do want to focus on STEM. They believe that, they have a lot of industry or medical facilities, and they want to improve the number of, people available to work at those places or keep them in their community. So they will focus on providing funding and resources to students in that. So it really depends on the community. And identification, again, using just standardized assessments has not traditionally captured all of the gifted students in our country, because diversity, some of the assessments are biased. So we have a problem with that. And that is typically offset by including the teachers in the decision, which requires a lot of teacher training, as you talked about. So there are systems set up, and there are some universities that in our country that kind of specialize in those. So they help school districts who are interested get them started. So at the school district level, usually there's an administrator or two who oversees the assessment and identification and helps with programming for those students. So as far as long-term studies, they are not based necessarily on financial, success. And I haven't looked at them lately, but there are long-term studies that have taken place, and typically including, my PhD was based in this. I measured how many students made choices to take more difficult classes in high school, whether they had our gifted programming or not. And we found that students who took gifted or who were, had that opportunity then chose more difficult classes. And there are lots of studies on how they do, we've got the imposter syndrome that usually rears its head in college. So, we want to make sure kids have those challenges early on. And so there's lots of studies based on that. But as far as like the gross national product or something like that, I don't know of anything that there's a correlation there. Common sense tells us there would be, but I don't know of any studies off the top of my head. So.
Thank you very much, Julie. We know that in Romania here that €1, let's say, if you put in education, you get €3 later on. So education is very important. And to answer again your question, Aura, we need to create legal pathways for educational diversity. And maybe we start with pilot programs, see how we are doing with those programs. Like talking to Julie here, talking to experts, study international models. There are many tools or programs. For instance, in New Zealand, they do a lot of competency-based teaching and training. In UK, they have the learning portfolios that you have in the States as well. In Australia, they developed a lot of online mentoring and online programs for gifted kids, for homeschooling. So basically, see what are all those resources and try to put them together and listen to families, listen to what families have to say. Julie mentioned that, it's very good for the families who do homeschooling or who have gifted kids to get to understand from one another which are the challenges, which are some things that they can help each family, help the other family. But we also need to understand that those gifted kids are not just gifts to society. They are just kids with gifts who deserve education that fits their specific needs. It's not education that fits everybody. So education isn't one size fits everybody or fits all. So their needs, the needs of gifted kids are real, are urgent, and unfortunately it seems that even in the States are not always met because it depends on many issues.
So the first step would be to create a framework in order to have more flexible ways of educating them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like everything else, have a curriculum. If a kid is very good on music, maybe that kid doesn't have to study 4 hours of chemistry or math. But maybe if somebody is very good at math, let that kid study more math and maybe less whatever. But there are also in education here, there is a little bit of a struggle. Some say that you still should have like kind of a basis in all fields, in all disciplines, and then go on on whatever you are best and specialize. I don't think, Julie, is there one opinion? I think there is a diversity of opinions even from that point of view.
Yes, I agree with you. And the other thing is, what does this child want to do? And they might be very good at math and not be interested in math at all. And we as a society, of course, want them to be a mathematician or, solve our problems. But if they don't want to, so I think that's something to consider too. Those routes should include the students' say and interest.
Maybe this is the best part of homeschooling, isn't it? The fact that you can really listen to what the kid really wants to do.
Yes. But at the same time, they are children, and we need to know our expectations. There are minimal standards that we have to meet, but yes, I agree.
Of course. Now, taking into account that we are getting close to ending our video podcast today, I would like you, in the end, for our listeners, to tell us if they were to remember one important thing from our discussion, what would that be? Julie?
To not make any assumptions around the title or the label gifted, is to just really know that that means that that's an individual that you need to get to know.
Good point. Thank you. And what about you, Cristina?
I was
What
going
would
to
be
say
the
something like Julie, so
conclusion?
now I will say something else, that every lost gifted child is lost potential for our entire society.
Yeah, for our countries.
Yes.
Right.
For our countries, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah, for our world.
Yeah.
Truly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much, Cristina, for sharing your expertise and experiences today with us. It's been enlightening to see how tailored education and homeschooling in particular can help gifted children thrive. So let's remember that every gifted child deserves a learning journey that truly fits them. Thank you everyone for listening to us, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.